Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Delegate Keith E. Haynes, Chair of the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee on the Committee on Appropriations. We're going to ask everyone if they could be sure to mute their microphones. We are streaming live and we don't want to necessarily have any feedback on the live stream. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that we are joined on the House side by our Vice Chair, Delegate Susie Proctor. We also are joined by members of the Public Safety Administration Committee, Delegate Asa Vera and Delegate Mike McKay. And in this sort of inaugural procedural process, we are joined with the Senate counterpart of this particular committee in these subject areas, chaired by Senator Melanie Griffith. And I will just pause for a moment for her to provide some introductory comments before we get started, if she would like.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the House Subcommittee. I'm Melanie Griffith, Chair of the Subcommittee on Health and Human Services for Senate Budget and Tax. In addition to our phenomenal staff, we are joined by the Vice Chair of Budget and Tax who serves on our subcommittee, Senator Jim Rosapepe. We also have a new member who's joined our subcommittee this session, not new to the Senate, but new to our subcommittee, Senator Young. He's with us, and also Senator Addie Eckert from the Eastern Shore, or the mid shore, the lower shore. I don't know, Senator Eckert, you know her, phenomenal leader. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to be here with you, and we look forward to hearing the briefings.
Okay, well, we have sort of a full plate for this afternoon's budget hearing. And I would be remiss if I didn't give some recognition to our great staff on Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee as well. And we're going to start with our first agency. The agency is going to be our boards. One second, I think we have a change here. Executive Department, Boards, Commission, and Offices. Our budget analyst, Grace Pedersen, will provide the analysis. Ms. Pedersen, you can go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Can y'all see that? Okay, great. Thank you again. It's my pleasure to present the Executive Department, Boards, Commissions, and Offices Fiscal 2022 Budget Analysis. The Executive Department, Boards, Commissions, and Offices work to provide planning and coordination of executive branch functions. As you can see here, the budget is almost exactly level with the fiscal 2021 working appropriation. Most of the agency's budget is for personnel, followed by the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives, which administers the state's AmeriCorps program and manages the Banneker Douglas Museum. I mentioned earlier the budget is pretty much level from fiscal 2021. There is an increase for one new position. It's a coordinator of autism strategy. This position was created in statute in the Department of Disabilities, but funding was provided contingent on legislation, transferring the position to the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. Currently, there's no legislation that would meet the requirements of the contingency. Even though one position is added, the number of positions in the agency remains level because one long-term position is abolished. Last year, the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives testified that they were planning to use this position for internal fiscal oversight and support. So DLS requests the agency comment on how they're going to perform those functions without this position. Then I have one key observation for you. It relates to the state's small and minority business enterprise participation in procurement. During the pandemic, approximately $1 billion have been awarded in emergency procurements. And this raises concerns about MBE participation, since historically there's been low participation in emergency procurements relative to all procurements. And even all procurements never met the 29% MBE participation goal. A potential barrier to this may be that the state currently doesn't track whether prime contractors are meeting the MBE participation agreed upon in the when they were awarded the contract. So DLS requests the agency comment on the feasibility of starting to track that data. Another potential barrier may be that there are some vacancies in the Small Business Reserve and Minority Business Enterprise liaison positions in a couple state agencies. So DLS is recommending that the Governor's Office of Small Business Affairs start tracking monthly data for the liaison contact information that they have on file to get an idea of which agencies don't have those liaison positions filled. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Peterson. Are there any questions for our budget analysts from members of the committees? Okay, I don't see any on the House side. Chair Griffith, do you have any on the Senate side? I see none. Okay, thank you very much. And we will now move to our agency representatives. We have representing the various agencies, Mr. Stephen McAdams, Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. We have Mr. James Reed, Special Secretary for the Governor's Office of Small, Minority, and Women Business Affairs. And we have additional testimony by Mr. Harry Chase, Director, Maryland Healthcare Alternative Dispute Resolution Office. And I would ask if you are speaking to just go ahead and proceed in the order which you were recognized. Mr. McAdams, you can go ahead and begin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed. How are you?
Good. I'm doing good. Okay. I'm doing good. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and all the subcommittee members. My name is Steve McAdams, and I'm the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. And joining me today is my colleague, Jimmy Reed, Special Secretary of the Governor's Office of Small, Minority, and Women Business Affairs. Jimmy's online and will provide testimony as well. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you as you review the proposed budget for the boards, commission, and offices. At this time, I would like to acknowledge those who make up the boards, commission, and offices. First, we have Patrick Lally, Senior Executive Director, Governor's Coordinating Office and Shared Services. Bethany Bean, Chairwoman of the Maryland State Board of Contract Appeals. Erica Snipes, Executive Director, Maryland State Labor Relations Board. David Soleil, Executive Director, Maryland State Commission on Criminal Sentencing Policy. And we have the following individuals online who can also answer questions. They are Jennifer Allgair, Executive Director for the Maryland State Ethics Commission. Harry L. Chase, the Executive Director, Healthcare Alternative Dispute Resolution Office. And Jennifer Colton, Director of the Governor's Grants Office. Our office would first like to start by thanking our assigned analysis, Ms. Grace Henderson, for her hard work and the acknowledgement of our efforts throughout the analysis. She has been a pleasure for our office to work with. The boards, commissions, and offices have put forth a responsible spending plan for fiscal year 2022 by instituting various cost-saving measures. Governor Hogan believes that it is important for the boards, commissions, and offices spending plan to reflect the same fiscal restraint he is asking all other agencies to implement. We have provided written testimony and have official comments on the analysis observations and recommendations as noted in the analysis document. At this time, I'd like to comment on behalf of the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives on page 5 of the analysis which Ms. Henderson just referenced. Last year, I testified that we were in the process of reclassifying the long-term vacant pin for fiscal support and oversight of the agency due to increase in funding and fund sources. In lieu of this position, our office has sought support of the fiscal services within the coordinating offices. I am available for further questions on this item, if you have any. If not, I will go ahead and turn this over to Jimmy Reed for comments to the analysis. Jimmy?
You may want to unmute yourself. There you go.
I did. Sorry about that.
Great.
But thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, Chairman Haynes and distinguished members here. For the record, I'm Jimmy Ree, Special Secretary of GOSBA, which is Governor's Office of Small Minority Women Business Affairs. Now, there were several items mentioned in the analysis regarding MBE participation and our office, GOSBA's role. So I would address them in the order presented. First, the key observations beginning on page 7, facilitating small and minority business enterprise participation in state procurement. Now, MBE inclusion is determined on a contract-by-contract basis, and the state's aspirational goal of 29% is to be achieved across all participating agencies and departments. Now, in order to facilitate small minority business enterprise participation in state procurement, it is incumbent on GOSBA, our office, to uphold the explicitly outlined procurement statutes and policies for preventing unconstitutional activities such as setting quotas. Now, as you all know, the Maryland's minority business enterprise, known as MBE, it was enacted in 1978 and is one of the oldest race and gender-based preference programs in the nation, known as the gold standard of such. Enhancements to the program has been incremental over the last 40 years and always within that narrowly tailored legal and constitutional framework that makes it possible to conduct such a program in the state procurement arena. Therefore, as a facilitator of the program, our role is very clear. Now, effects of COVID-19 emergency procurements on MBE participation rates, if I may speak about that. The rise in emergency procurements during the state of emergency preempted by the COVID-19 pandemic is significant. No question about that. The emergency procurements reached $1 billion with the MBE inclusion of just 7%, which is 70 million. Now, GOSBA, our office, along with many other stakeholders, is taking a new look at the emergency procurement designation and its impact on providing access to the state-funded contracting arena for small minority women and veteran-owned businesses as well. The regulations involving emergency procurement do not automatically eliminate evaluation for MBE inclusion. Our office, GOSBA, encourages all participating agencies and departments to evaluate all solicitations, including emergency procurements, for designation to the Small Business Reserve, known as SBR program, or for MBE inclusion. Now, agency and department procurement officers they are trained people. They are trained to make informed decisions that align with existing policies when called upon to determine if a procurement is designated as emergency. Now, in some cases, the nature of the emergency, the time frame, the capacity required of the procurement may conclude that MBE evaluation and inclusion does not serve in the state's best interest. For those of you who may have questions on COMA, I could later on explain to that. So staff in our office, simply we are outside of the process and evaluation of this emergency procurement. On pages 8 and 9, under activities to improve participation, now, in order to gauge how well prime contractors meet their MBE goals over the life of a contract and tracking vendors' past performance in meeting MBE requirements, they will fall within the scope of the Department of General Services, DGS, the home of the Office of State Procurement, OSP, And that includes contract compliance as well. Now, DGS manages the state's public bid board system known as Email and Marketplace Advantage, also known as EMA. EMA is being developed to function as a full procure-to-pay vendor platform as we speak, with the capability to report activities and outcomes. Now, GOSBA, our office, will fully support that effort and work in collaboration with DGS to develop a report that tracks NBE achievement by prime contractors and ensuring that such reporting is that functionality within the MI system is an option that we need to be reminded of. The analysis also highlights the importance of liaison program to the ability of small and minority businesses to participate in state procurement. The DNS recommends requesting our office to track liaison vacancies existing each month throughout fiscal 2022 and report the data to this committee, to the committees here. Now, it's important to note that every agency participating in the NBE and SBR programs is required to have a liaison. The liaison plays an important role, as we all know, in evaluating procurements for SBR designation and NBE inclusion, and assists the NBE and SBR vendors with any advocacy issues that may arise during the life of contract. So it's a vital role. So when this position is vacant, it has a direct impact on participation. So GOSBA supports this initiative and recognizes the extensive coordination involved in order to proceed immediately. So in conclusion, GOSBA concurs with committee narrative to report liaison vacancy data for the period January 1 of 22 through June 30 of 2022. And I am available for any questions. And if there are no questions for me, I thank you again for your time and opportunity to speak here today.
Okay, do we have any question from the House? I don't see any, and I will yield to the chair of HHS, Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary Ree. Just a couple of questions as it pertains to the minority businesses. And I'm sure you are aware this interim, President Ferguson named a work group on equity and inclusion, and our colleagues in the House through their speaker have done a lot of work through the Black Agenda with a goal of ensuring that we have every opportunity, that we take advantage of every opportunity to allow for equitable financial opportunities for our minority business community. I had the occasion to read the disparity study that was commissioned, actually it was commissioned while I was out of office in 2017, and read some really troubling data, as have many of my colleagues, and Senator Eckert served with me on that work group. Out of the 47 recommendations we came up with, 27 of them pertain to the wealth and financial inclusion area. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to see that report or any of the legislation that has been proposed this session. I guess what I'm asking is, I'm looking at the Ms. Pedersen's analysis and seeing things like 3% of emergency procurements had NBE participation, and that is troubling. But equally troubling is that we have this aspirational goal, as you defined it, that to date, since its inception, we haven't met. And I appreciate you clearly walking us through the goal of your department and the folks that work with you. I've, as you know, had the opportunity to meet with them and the procurement officer and DGS, and there seems sometimes a little bit of this going on, like who's responsible for that part. And so it would be helpful for us, as you know, in addition to when you spoke to the importance of the positions that are vacant, could you talk about how you coordinate with those offices at DGS and the procurement office to proactively engage minority businesses in the procurement process and make sure there's a level playing field, because it seems like a lot of what I hear is we're reporting on the waivers that are applied for and reporting on primes that didn't live up to what they were contracted for. What are we doing prospectively, and how is your department engaged in that part of the process?
Well, thank you for your question, Senator. And I think the best way for me to answer will be this. We look at the market outside, the reality out there as is, okay? Because you got to get a picture in black and white form in order to come up with a solution that meets the reality out there. And then we will determine what to do. So some of the things that we're doing in order to address what exists out there, which you eloquently described, some of the areas there are lack of competency among small businesses. So our office does a lot of outreach programs. Last year, we reached out to about 21,000 companies, right? Now through this COVID and something unexpected happens, our response rate from the small business community is 3 times as many as the prior COVID, okay? Indicating the need out there. So one of the areas that we work with DGS closely is make sure that the companies that are participating in the procurement arena are competent. They know they are good at what they do because they got to have that basic core thing, okay? That's the first thing we work on. And second thing we are always working on, and it seems like this is one of those things, the solution looks like an answer to a pie. It's a never ending digits, okay? It's forever. And that is access to capital issue, because without addressing that issue, many small businesses have a very difficult time enhancing their competency. It's an issue that we have to really address from the bottom up as well as top-down approach. As a holistic approach, it's one area that I think we all need to work on very aggressively and openly and objectively, okay? And the third thing, of course, is what we are involved in, which is how do we improve policies so that we improve the forest, or where we improve the forest so that these small companies that are trees within the forest can all receive sunlight and enough sufficient amount of water to grow. And that's a policy matter. So I think we are all doing great job on that one, right? So it's just a matter of combining and aligning those 3 factors. And that's what we do on a daily basis. So who is most responsible? We all are, okay? Because you all know, Senator Griffith, the measure of our society, whether it's a marketplace or whether it's a society, is determined by how well we work with those among us who are least privileged, okay, who are most disconnected. So I think the intention, everything is there. And trust me, we are working very hard on a daily basis to make sure these people have access to procurement. But unless we address those 3 things I just mentioned, competency, capital, policies to favor these companies, it's an always uphill struggle.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I don't want to delay the committee any further because, you know, I could stay on this subject all afternoon, but we have some other reports. But I will ask that you and I connect offline, because I think there are some issues with bonding in terms of competency. There are opportunities where there are occasions, and we've unfortunately had some occasions in the past year that have been reported on through our audit committee and the media, where we've had some bad actors. Now, we know in every business you have people going rogue, but if we have a procurement officer that is doling out contracts at a small level to a friend or a friend of a friend, then that makes it so that other businesses don't get a chance to compete and participate and build their capabilities. So we'll talk offline. Look forward to working with you. And like I said, it's been a pleasure working with your team. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me that.
My office will follow up with you, Senator. Okay.
Please do. Great.
Senator Chair Griffith, I think you have a couple of hands raised on the Senate side.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will turn this over to you. You can manage the chat. That way we can save time. And
Okay. All right. Senator Eckert.
Thank you very much. And my question is to Mr. Ray too, because you've raised several, well, 3 of the basic issues, I think, that I've encountered in meeting with groups to be prepared for our Senate work group. And I guess I would just like to say, maybe offline, we could have a discussion about what kind of initiatives can we put in place to address that access to capital and that those elements of competency, because even the best of folks who come into my community, our communities on the shore, are confronted with these similar dilemmas. And if we really want to grow and change the complexion of our communities in concert with a lot of the initiatives that are taking place, we've got to address these at a very basic level. So just to alert you, we'll be coming back to you to have more discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any further hands raised from the committee members, but I would like to, will just weigh in that I fully agree with the earlier comments made from the Chair Griffith and Senator Eckhart as well. The trends is what I'm looking at, not looking at the emergency procurement, but when I just look at the trends of where we were in overall participation just less than 7 years ago, we're at 27.3%, which is meeting that close to that 29% MBE participation goal. And it has declined, fast forward to 2019, to a little over 17%. And what happens is that we're on a parallel track of declining participation, whether it's overall or emergency. And I just want to reiterate that in many cases, when we are in emergency situations like the pandemic that we're in now, these type of contracts can be so vital to restoring our economy, because we are a small business majority-based economy, as opposed to having Fortune 500 companies. We are driven by our small businesses, and the more that we can strengthen them, the more we strengthen our own state economy. So with that, we'll move right along. I see that we have Mr. Harry Chase, Director, Maryland Healthcare Alternative Dispute Resolution Office. You can go ahead and begin when you're ready.
I think it is just a mistake. My office, this is a new procedure, signed me up, but they told me they had to sign me up as a speaker, to testify. I just want to thank you again, as I do every year. This is my 27th year back with you, and I appreciate you guys looking at our budget every year and the support you give us. And I apologize for inviting you into my kitchen, but at my age of 77, I have been working from home since March, and I would have a tie on, but I think since February, I haven't had one, and I may have to go back to school to learn how to tie one. So thank you again for your invitation, and I hope to be back next year for my 28th year. Thank you very much.
Great. We hope to see you back as well. And thank you so much for all that you do and continue to do. Thank you. I don't see any questions from any other further questions from any House members. So that will conclude our hearing on the Executive Department, boards, commissions, and offices. If the committees, will now turn to the Secretary of State. Our budget analyst, Mr. Samuel Quist, will provide the analyses. Mr. Quist, you can begin when you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to share my screen here so you can all see the presentation. Okay. My name is Samuel Quist. I will be presenting the analysis for the Secretary of State's office. So the 22 allowance increases by 151,000. The total allowance is 4.1 million. We have one item to note for fiscal 21 in the analysis. That was the cost containment actions that the Board of Public Works took at its July 1st meeting for fiscal 21. There was a $724,000 reduction in general funds due to two actions: the elimination of the office's international division and its two positions, as well as the deferment of the office's planned notary database replacement project from fiscal 21 to 22. Moving to the overview of the 22 allowance, Exhibit 1. This shows combined about 3/4 of the budget is comprised of personnel expenses, 65% for regular personnel and 11% for contractual. The operating expenses, a large share are cost allocations at 9% of the budget, and then contractual services at 12%. 360,000 of that 483,000 for contractual service are contracts related to the notary database replacement project. Exhibit number 2, this shows the changes in the 22 allowance. The largest change, as noted, is the notary database replacement project. Those contracts increased by 360,000. That reflects that action by the Board of Public Works to defer that project from fiscal 21 to 22. And then the largest decrease is a decrease for contractual personnel expenses of 238,000. This partially reflects 4 contractual personnel that were eliminated from the budget in fiscal 22. And then there are a few other smaller changes on the top section of the chart. Regular personnel increases by a total of 46,000. And then there are a few other operating expense changes there for a total increase of 151,000. The analysis includes a brief description of the notary database replacement. This was due to a couple of statutes, Chapter 407 of 2019. I believe that's a typo. It should be 2019 rather than 2020. Chapter 407 allowed for remote notarization practices in Maryland, and it also implemented new testing and educational requirements for notaries public. In order to fully implement these provisions of this law and to allow the notary commission's processing to continue without any issues, the office advises that they will need to redevelop their notary system due to the state of the current system. It's a legacy IT system that is in need of replacement. So the portion of the bill that dealt with remote and electronic notarization practices, that went into effect on October 1st. However, the governor issued an executive order in March of 2020 before that to allow remote notarizations to take place effective in March due to the pandemic. And the other provisions of the bill are related to testing and education requirements. Those were delayed 1 year by Chapter 571 of 2020, and those will go into effect on October 1st of 2021. Moving to the personnel section, we did note, as I mentioned previously, in fiscal 21, there were 2 positions abolished by the Board of Public Works cost containment actions. The 2 positions in the office's international division, which was abolished. The individuals in those 2 positions were transferred to open positions at the Department of Commerce. And then also there were the 4 contractual positions that I mentioned that were eliminated, which include 2 notary officer positions and 2 positions in the address confidentiality program. In the key observations section of the document, we note first the notary public commissions processed per year. Exhibit 3 shows this. These decrease in fiscal 2020. This was also an executive order issued by the governor to extend the licensing and certain commissions that are processed by the state. Because of the pandemic, the executive order automatically extends notary public commissions to the 30-day mark prior to the expiration of the governor's public health emergency. Because of that, the automatic extension, there was a decrease in the number that were processed during fiscal 2020. There were about 20,500 processed in fiscal 2020, and there's about 80,000 total notaries serving across the state in total. Similarly, with that executive order, that also applied to charitable organizations, which the office registers, which is shown on Exhibit 4. The number of total charities registered, the blue line on the top of the chart, that continued to increase in 2020. However, the bars on the bottom, the red bar shows the number of delinquent charities that also increased during the year, in part due to that executive order by the governor that also extended the charitable registrations. Any charity you registered is automatically extended until 30 days past the expiration of the governor's executive order for the public health emergency. The final chart in the document shows the participation for the address confidentiality program, which is run by the Secretary of State's office for survivors of domestic abuse to reroute their mail through the office in order to keep their address confidential. And there was a little over 1,100 participants in that program in 2020. Finally, DLS is recommending to concur with the governor's allowance for, and that is all for the recommendations, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Quist. Are there any questions for our budget analyst? Chairwoman Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is shorter than my last one. I just had a quick question, and it may be best asked of the agency. Do we know, I know of some nonprofits who were going through that that process of making sure that they got their organizations registered in the past, and I was told that it was a very laborious paper process, like nothing was being done electronically. Do you know if that is now being done in a more modern way, or is it still being done with paper and mail, U.S. Postal Service?
I've been told by the agency that that's along with their notary replacement project, their other IT systems types of functions are also, they're pretty legacy IT systems, and they probably would, we can confirm that with the agency, but I believe that that's probably still mostly manual based at this point from what they've told me.
Okay, thank you. I'll check with them. I appreciate it. And thank you for sharing the update on the notaries. Our office deals with a lot of those applications, so thank you for that.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Senator Young.
Yes, thank you. I was slightly aware of the activities of your international division. Was the division cut or eliminated, or was it just transferred to Commerce first off?
Well, the two individuals serving in those positions were transferred to open positions at the Department of Commerce. So the division was cut from the Secretary of State's office, but my understanding is that that work that they were doing was moved to the Commerce Department, and that the Commerce Department does a similar work already, so they were merging that there. I know that the agency can clarify that. My understanding is that there was some overlap with work that the Commerce Department does, so they were trying to kind of merge that together to cut costs, and that was the primary motivation for that action.
Okay, so to the best of your knowledge, none of the activities that took place were cut. They were just moved as part of the transfer?
That's my understanding. I don't know on the Commerce Department. I don't deal with that area, so I'm not sure, but that's to my understanding. I believe that's correct.
Okay, because all of your activities under that division weren't necessarily economic matters, I believe, were they?
No, they also do other items such as relationships with other the sister states program,
Yeah,
visits, other things like that. Again, I'm not sure on the commerce side. I'd have to ask the analyst that does the commerce activities what happened with those. But I believe most of that probably was transferred over. I think you.
Senator, if you could unmute your microphone.
Sorry, I didn't know it muted again.
No problem.
Just saying thank you, and I would appreciate it if you could check and let me know if
I can.
Activity still in existence.
Sure, I can certainly ask our analyst who works with the Commerce Department, and we can have them get a follow-up on some more information on that. Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, seeing no further questions for our analysts, we will now hear from our Secretary of State, the Honorable John Wappensmith, Secretary of State, Mr. Louis Borunda, Deputy Secretary of State. We have Mr. Frederick Smalls, Assistant Secretary of State for Administration and Finance, Ms. Kathy Smith, Assistant Secretary of State, Mr. Michael Schlein, Administrator of Charity and Legal Services, Ms. Gail Clackering, Administrator of the Division of State Documents, Ms. Ann Hoyer, Director of Address Confidentiality Programs. Welcome, everyone, and Secretary of State, welcome, and you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Well, delighted to be with you today, and I guess I would describe our organization as lean but not mean. I'll go ahead and Senator Young, I can answer your questions that you just had right off the top. What has happened is that the existing law has the Sister States program still under the Secretary of State's office. With the action that was taken by the Board of Public Works in moving positions, while those positions were moved, the Secretary of Commerce has allowed us to have that staff support to continue to do the Secretary of State's legal obligation right now under the existing law to do the Sister States program, and we've been doing that ever since. There's legislation that has been put in by the administration to change that on sister states. However, it's also my understanding that as far as the interaction with embassies in Washington and all the other programs outside of the sister states program, that continues to be the Secretary of State's responsibility. So I've been continuing to do that. We have lots of work we do every day that Luis Borunda in particular do with lots of our constituents. So it's been a pretty busy time, and whether that's things like getting emergency medication to some of our people that were in Israel, we were able to work that to some extraordinary efforts to make that happen, even during this time of the COVID, because there are obviously very limited flights in and out of Israel at the time, and other things that we deal with every day where, let's say we have someone that passes away in a foreign country, and there's a lot of work that has to be done to help those families when that happens, and we do that all the time. So it's been a busy time. It hasn't slacked off at all, and thankfully we had that continued support from the Secretary of Commerce is allowing us to have that staff support. Okay.
So I'm glad.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I said, first of all, let me say we do, of course, support the governor's budget submission. And we, as I said, we are mean but not lean, or lean but not mean, I should say. In our finance and support services, for example, we had, I'd like to know the level of activity that we have has been extraordinary. And the people that are doing the work are obviously the best ever. I'm so impressed with what the folks have been able to do. And for example, we have last year, we had parents here. Okay, hopefully we're okay.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Thank you. For example, last year, we have, of course, a desk that processes apostilles and certifications for people that have to have documents certified for overseas use. And last year we have one person, by the way, that works that desk. And last year he processed 40,000 apostilles and certifications by himself. And that's for the last fiscal year. And I will tell you that that's continued on. In fact, with the COVID-19, one of the things that we had to do, we initially had people coming in 5 days a week, then we cut that back to 3 days and by appointments only. And finally, we had to go over completely to a mail system. So except in very dire emergencies, we have everybody sending it in by mail or by FedEx. So that's, I would also tell you that we have 95% customer approvals of that kind of work, in that particular area. And that's key to, obviously, to all the work that's being done. Trademarks is another area that's actually going up this year. And we had 411 trademarks last year. Last year, we look to be at least 500 this year. So it's interesting in the trademark area that we see that increase being done by businesses, obviously, and individuals here in the state. I also pulled a few other things for you. In our charities and legal division, we have 2 people who process those 80,000, and it's pretty closer to probably 90,000 notaries that we do. And the customer satisfaction in that area is 99.7%. And that's amazing to me, quite frankly. And I think, as you also know, now 36 of the 47 senators have given us the full authority and asked us to do the processing of all of those notaries. So that's a lot of work. I will tell you right now, that's about 10,000 per person that are processed every year. And that means credit checks, it means personal checks, it means looking at lots of different things to certify that, in fact, these are legitimate people that are doing the work for the state. Just last week, I took a sample last week. So we had 598 notary applications last week alone. And so far this year, that's 4,140 so far that we've had just since beginning of January. At the same time, there were 981 emails, all inquiries or requests that required response back from our 2 people. They printed and mailed commissions 711 just in this 1 week period last week. And that's 3,400 for the year so far. In charity applications, we received 318 of those last week. And that's one that's going to actually peak up a lot because of the fact of the COVID, those things were put off and they were given the opportunity to have an extension on that. But that's going to run out fairly soon, and we're going to get hit pretty hard in that. The other thing we've done, just to let you know, and that is we cross-train all of our people so that in case we place one of those 2 people happens to get sick or comes down with COVID, we have some of the folks over in the charity area that are fully able to step in and do that. In the address confidentiality program, that's another interesting one as well. We have 1,199 currently in the program. And as you may recall, that's a program that provides a safety net for people that are victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. One of the things that the legislature did now 2 years ago was to change the law to allow people not only to be in the program where they're actually moved to a new address, but one of the things that we discovered was that there were people that wanted to buy houses. and to be able to do that without appearing on the public record. And so we had a year-long study of that, and we worked through all the kinks. And just to tell you now, for the 1 year period so far, we have 22 homeowners who have bought properties under this program. And we have 5 more in the queue. I will tell you that's far more than we ever thought would happen per year. And so obviously it's working, and it's doing the kind of protection that we need. So those are just a few quick highlights. As I said, we do lots of things in this organization that people aren't aware of. We do special police also, certifications of them, and also in some cases denying those as well. And so we do spend a fair amount of time on doing lots of other incidental things, not incidental things, they're important things, but to a lesser extent than some of the numbers. So again, we thank you, and we're happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you so much, Secretary. Do we have any questions? See Senator Young. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I wanted to thank the Secretary. We handled the notaries in my office for several years, and it seemed awfully inefficient with the going back and forth. And it's worked very well for us having it down in your office. We've gotten no complaints on it, and it's allowed us to do a lot more constituent work in other areas, particularly at times like this with unemployment. So I think y'all have done a good job with that, and it certainly assisted us, and just say thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Young. We appreciate that. And I see that every day myself, and I see the work that they do. I'm overwhelmed by what they're able to do, quite frankly. So thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further questions from members of the respective committees. So I believe that we'll end our hearing today for the Office of the Secretary of State. Secretary of State, Wanda Smith, thank you so much for all that you do in your office. I know it can be a little bit challenging, especially during COVID-19, but you guys continue to do a great job. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much myself.
Okay, that concludes our hearing for today. If the committees will now turn to the military department, we have our budget analyst, Mr. Nicholas Konzelman, who will provide our analysis for today. Mr. Konzelman, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, so jump right into the 2022 budget analysis for the military department. We can see that the budget decreases by a little less than $75 million in the 2022 allowance. It's mostly driven by the federal portion here. That's the presence in fiscal 2021 of public assistance grant money from FEMA to assist with the coronavirus pandemic. And so the absence of that money that was one time in nature in 2021, not being carried forward into 2022 is what's really driving the decrease here. Looking at a breakdown of agency spending for fiscal 2022, we can see that a quarter of the total allowance is for personnel expenses. The largest chunk here is for the Maryland Emergency Management Agency. That includes their operation expenses, but also the various grants that they manage as well, such as the AMOS grant. The Army and Air operations make up smaller portions of the pie. However, that's because a lot of the federal missions that the National Guard takes on tend to be fully federally funded. And so that money doesn't usually flow through the state budget. And so it wouldn't appear in the pie chart here. Moving to Exhibit 2 in the Where It Goes chart, like I said, we can see that the decrease is about $75 million. And again, you have some smaller personnel changes on the top here, as well as some operational and administrative changes. But the real big ticket item here is the presence of the Federal Disaster Relief Grant in fiscal 2021 that was not carried forward into fiscal 2022. On the personnel side, the department loses 2 regular positions. Those are 2 honor guard positions, and that's consistent with declining requests for their missions. And so again, that's just a realignment with the demand for the work that those positions would be doing. On the vacancy data, we can see that the vacancy is quite high when compared to the turnover expectancy, though it is worth noting that 70% of these vacant positions are either fully or partially federally funded, and so it doesn't necessarily come at a cost to the state. The main issue, or rather key observation that we'll be talking about today is the military department's role in the COVID-19 response. Obviously, the military department has had quite a busy year the past year, and it's in no small part to the coronavirus pandemic. MEMA has been a lead agency managing the logistics of acquiring and distributing the various resources and other operations that are necessary to address the pandemic, and as well as handling the coordination between governments, businesses, and nonprofits. And the National Guard has also helped to distribute resources, as well as set up temporary medical triage and pop-up testing locations. The one piece that is worth noting is that the significant portion of the federal money that would be flowing through MEMA is authorized by the Stafford Act at the federal level. And so it would go from FEMA to MEMA to the various subrecipients at the county, local, or state, or rather nonprofit level. And so currently there's a 75% cost share. However, the Biden administration has indicated that it is going to be reconsidering eligible COVID-19 related expenses to possibly be reimbursed at 100% cost share rather than the more standard 75% cost share that's currently anticipated. And so MEMA has explained that $750 million is anticipated from the public assistance funding to be provided by MEMA. However, only $750 million has been processed. And that's that portion that we've been talking about in the fiscal 2021 budget. And so we are asking MEMA to comment on when it anticipates to reconcile the remaining public assistance awards, as well as any potential changes to the cost sharing guidance coming down from FEMA. The second part of this relates to some proposed modifications to the disaster assistance threshold. This is coming down from MEMA. It's a proposed rule change. It has not been implemented yet. And in fact, there hasn't been necessarily a date that FEMA plans to implement this, but it is worth noting that FEMA is currently proposing to change what's called the cost of assistance. And so that would be the minimum threshold that the state is required to pay when receiving assistance from FEMA for a Disaster Recovery and Reform Act emergency. Under the current rules, Maryland is required to pay $8.7 million. However, under the new rule, that indicator would change to about $16.5 million, or a 90% increase, largely driven by a more regular update of the inputs to the calculation of that rule, as well as taking into account the state's total tax base. And so we are asking the military department to comment on these rule changes and its impact on the ability to respond to COVID and any other major disasters in the future. And finally, we have the recommended budget actions. We are recommending that the budget committees concur with the governor's allowance. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Conzelman. Do we have any questions for us at this time? Hearing, seeing none. We will now turn to our agency representative. We have Major General Timothy, I'm going to pronounce this Gowan, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay, good. Adjunct General. And I'm just going to go down the line of everyone who is listed. I don't know whether everyone is here, but it's Mr. Russell Strickland, Executive Director, Maryland Emergency Management Agency. Mr. Nathan Crum, Chief of Staff of Maryland Military Department. Mr. Chaz Emby, Deputy Executive Director of Maryland Emergency Management Agency, Ms. Catherine Kelly, Director of Legislative and Government Affairs for the Maryland Military Department, Mr. K. Andrew Yonke, Director of Installations for the Maryland Military Department, Ms. Kelly Hammond, Director of Finance for the Maryland Military Department, Mr. Nicholas Pendle, Director of Human Resources for the Maryland Military Department. And I must say, I feel very safe today with this stellar panel. Okay, so you can go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chairman. The safety transfers virtually as well.
Great.
So, Mr. Chairman Haynes and Chairman Griffiths, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to give you an overview of all the great work the Maryland Military Department's done and going to continue to do. As you said, I've got the Executive Director of Maryland Emergency Management Agency, Russell Strickland, on. He's going to answer all the hard questions that you've got. And if there's any really hard questions, that staff that you mentioned there is going to help us out with that. But I'm going to give you an overview and address some of Mr. Konzelman's questions and concerns. And if you got any further questions, we'll answer those right afterwards. Again, the Maryland Military Department appreciates this opportunity to update the committee on the activities of the department and to respond to issues raised and recommendations contained in the operating budget analysis prepared by the Department of Legislative Services. I'm pleased to submit to the budget committees our key accomplishments of the past year. As members of the Maryland Military Department, we are called upon to serve and protect our communities, our state, and our nation. Our success depends on making the most of the talent within our organization. We must be inclusive and diverse, maximizing skills and experiences of the leaders and members at all levels. We have built a diverse leadership team of which we can be proud, but must continue to improve. So this summary incorporates the accomplishment of the Maryland Army National Guard, the Maryland Air National Guard, the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, and the Maryland Defense Force. The Maryland National Guard has continued to support many overseas contingency operations. Our personnel have served in ongoing operations such as Afghanistan, Estonia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the Horn of Africa. They have all assisted in all aspects of the COVID-19 response, including security and testing at the State House, logistical support for construction, pop-up test sites, logistical support at the Convention Center, National Guard testing support teams, mobile vaccination teams, planning support teams to assist the Maryland Department of Health, food distribution missions, PPE transportation, and distribution missions. Additionally, the Maryland National Guard has provided security in Annapolis and Washington, D.C. for the 2020 presidential election and the 2021 presidential inauguration. The Maryland National Guard is supported by the Military Department's Finance and Contracting section, which has provided critical support throughout each phase of COVID-19 operations from March of last year to now. In the initial months of the COVID pandemic, the staff manually processed payroll for nearly 1,000 soldiers and airmen on state active duty. The contracting staff worked closely with local hotels to provide lodging at over 24 locations throughout Maryland. And the financing and contracting staff continue to support other ongoing state activations. MEMA continues to support the state's multi-agency response to COVID-19 along with the Maryland Department of Health and will continue to do so throughout 2021. MEMA is the primary conduit to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and has successfully received a number of federal resources to aid the state's response, particularly through FEMA's Public Assistance Program. The Maryland Defense Force assisted in COVID-19 response by providing staffing support for Joint Operations Headquarters, licensed providers for medical support planning, and cybersecurity support. I'll now address some of Mr. Konzelman's recommended issues that we touch on. The first one is he asked MEMA to comment on when it expects to reconcile the remaining public assistance awards via budget amendments, and then also update the committees on anticipated changes to the federal cost sharing guidance. The initial period of performance ends on March 26, 2024, with a 90-day liquidation period following. Due to the complexity and unknown nature of COVID-19 and that there's no end to the event period, this will likely be extended. Also, the projects funded under this program include costs in the hundreds of millions and will likely take much longer than a typical project to be fully documented, reconciled, and closed. The total disaster cost for public assistance will likely exceed $1.5 billion. MEMA can provide regular updates on real-time costs and payments made to grant subrecipients throughout the event period. In addition to these factors, the federal cost share is being adjusted from 100%, to 100% from 75%, causing a large increase in funding statewide. These factors make it hard to estimate full reconciliation of all costs, but can be expected to take several years past the initial period of performance to fully reconcile and close the grant. Mr. Consman also recommended that the military department comment on the rule changes and the impact on the state's ability to respond to COVID-19 as well as other major disasters in the future. Once again, this falls into MEMA's bailiwick. MEMA predicts the proposed rule change by FEMA will have substantial implications regarding the ability of communities to access disaster assistance. While some of Maryland's jurisdictions may have significant resources, others, such as Maryland's many rural jurisdictions, lack sufficient resources to recover from disasters. These proposed changes are compounded by the severe economic conditions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Based on the proposed changes, Maryland will experience an almost 90% increase in minimum threshold, but some states are increased as high as 112% of the current threshold if these changes are enacted all at once. This this increase does not adequately allow state and local communities to prepare for future disasters. We do concur with the governor's allowance and with the operating budget recommendation. And finally, there was a 2020 Joint Chairman's Report requested action. To the committee narrative requested that the military budget funds for the Army National Guard maintenance funding in a dedicated sub-program with submission of the 2022 budget. And then with our FY22 budget, the Army National Guard maintenance budget was moved into a sub-program 3,200 and into sub-program 3,600. That concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman, and I'll stand by ready to answer your question.
Okay, thank you so much. I see we have a question from Senator Edgar.
I forgot unmutes down below. I'm sorry about that. Yes, Mr. Gowan, distinguished officer, thank you so much for your leadership, and thank you for being so responsive out and around, whether it was to help with food distribution or to help with our vaccine distribution. Much appreciated on the shore. With regard to the proposed rule change by FEMA, do you know if the congressional team is working on that, and is the governor involved? Because that will hurt us. I'm in Dorchester, and of course, I think we're the lowest lying community in the state. So we've just gone through a number of these issues with regard to funding, and we want to make sure that those resources are there. So is there any more that we need to be doing as this committee or from our local jurisdictions?
That's one of those hard questions I promised that Russ Strickland would answer. Russ?
Thank you, General. And Senator, yes,
Oh,
we
hey,
have
how are
been.
you? Yeah,
I'm good. How are you?
thank you.
We have been communicating regularly with the federal congressional delegation through the governor's Washington office, particularly because of the COVID event. We've had almost weekly meetings with them, and we have raised this point to them, giving them our position. We've also filed our position with the National Emergency Managers Association, and then we've made those comments directly to FEMA. So they right now are in the comment gathering stage of this. So we still have an opportunity, particularly nationally, to present this to FEMA and hopefully win the battle that they don't raise it this quickly and this high.
Yeah, thank you very much. Looking at resilience of our communities and responsiveness, I know we had the delegation down to look at an area down at Ragged Point that we just were able to get some relief and funding for. And we have those kind of incidents again, which, as you know, we will. The creek does rise. That makes a real hardship. Even though we're implementing a lot of those changes in standards of building codes, it still makes a big difference. and our ability to handle our shoreline. Thank you so much. If there's anything else we can do, we certainly will, because we see keeping close communication, with our Congress people as well. But
We will do it. Thank you.
thank you.
Two quick questions for you before we move on. Number one, I just see that our analyst, Nicholas, provided an update on the troop strength, and looks like we're at about 100%. My question is, I'm just curious, this is more of a process question, I guess. At 100%, are there still opportunities for individuals who are interested in joining the National Guard, Maryland National Guard? Are those opportunities still there? Is it a wait list, or do you take them even, and we'll be at 101, 110%?
The latter, sir. There's constant turnover. So like every year, I can't remember the exact number. It's something like 15% changes out. And so we're constantly having to recruit back against those. And, you can see from the chart, it wasn't easy to get back to 100%. We have a great recruiting staff, a great leadership in the Army National Guard. So if you've got friends that want to join, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Please send them our way. And also we can go over 100%. And, the cap basically is for the Army National Guard nationally. So that we can move that, we can adjust accordingly. And it's always good for us to be more than 100%, because then National Guard Bureau sees us as a state that they can provide more force structure to. So that's good for us as well.
Good. And finally, one of the programs this particular subcommittee on the House side has always had a keen focus on is the Free State Challenge program.
Yes, sir.
And the benefits of that program. We're doing some good work with some good young people and trying to turn their lives around and give them opportunities that may not otherwise be there. Can you just give me a little bit of insight of how the program is doing?
Yes, sir.
Rates, et cetera.
It's been tough with COVID because we had to shut down. Back in, even before COVID kicked off, we had a flu epidemic that ran through the cadets. So that kind of affected our thought process. And then, the National Guard Bureau is pretty tough on you when you shut down. There's a lot of states out there that are vying for those resources. So if you shut down, at first it was hard to convince them, but then every state across the country, they saw the condition. It's not a good situation to have everyone all confined and stuff like that. So National Guard Bureau across the nation shut everyone down. Now the challenge is starting back up again. So we're doing that. We're moving out. Mr. Crumb's on the line. I can't remember when the first class that we're going to start is. I think it's June. Is that right, Nate?
Sure. We're potentially going to start in August.
August. Okay.
Just as a side note, during the time that they were shut down, we've worked on enhancing the facilities there. So we've got some major construction projects to renovate the barracks areas and latrines. So that time has been put to good use.
Good. The Public Safety Administration Subcommittee actually did a site visit a few years back of the facility there, and I think there were renovations slated at that time, or at least looking at the needs for renovating some of the facilities there. Good program. And what I would just ask as a follow-up, you can provide this to the committee so we can pass it along. Just how do we, if we know of individuals or families that may want to take advantage of the program with, for a particular situation they may have, how do they go about doing that and getting a student to become a cadet in that program would be helpful?
Yes, sir. We'll pass that on to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any further questions? I see none.
I did one more.
Oh, yes, I do. Senator Eckert.
I'm sorry. I have another question. Thank you very much. And Major General Gowan, just a question. I remember years ago, I had some retired military folks who had been, was it with the defense? What's the defense?
Maryland Defense Force.
The Defense Force, yes. And there had been a little bit of tension between the Defense Force people and the folks within the Maryland Guard.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
All resolved, or is that integrated now, and is there room for advancement and recognition, or is that kind of each one its defined entity in and of itself?
One of the things that the Maryland National Guard did, I think it was about going back 4 or 5 years now, was to relook at the force structure of the Maryland Defense Force and make sure that they were providing a capability that we actually needed to meet our mission. And
Yes.
so in so doing, we identified some key capabilities. For example, medical support, engineering, cyber. There's one or two others that I'm forgetting. And so therefore we streamlined the force, and some of the people that really didn't fit into those categories and some of the other reasons, we said, thanks for your service, but I think we're gonna, go another direction here. But since then, I think we're about 120 or so folks in the Maryland Defense Force, and we've got a great commander in there now, and he's got some real strong vision. And we've had the last 2 commanders have been great. We just changed out again this year. So we're on the right path. I think we can't do our mission without them. They, particularly the cyber team and some of the IT folks that come on board. We've actually put them on orders. They're all volunteer, but when we did the COVID stuff early on, we actually put them on orders and many of them became state employees for a period of time. So it's a really good relationship, and they're integral to the Maryland National Guard.
Okay, that's good to know, because from time to time I hear about that. And I know we used to have that wonderful piece of equipment that a number of years back came down. We do Ironman, down in the area. And I don't remember if it was MEMA or the Defense Fund or who, but, occasionally we'd bring that piece of equipment down to staff the finish line with all the medical incidents.
Oh, sure.
Occur. And that was a great service to the community before Ironman took it over. So I know you all are very nimble, very flexible, and very adaptable. So we do appreciate, and please take back to all of your folks how much they're deeply appreciated throughout the state. Thank you.
We will, Senator.
Service. Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Chair.
You're quite welcome, Senator. I don't see any further hands raised, so I think that will conclude our hearing for today. Thank you so much. Stay safe and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that you're doing for the state of Maryland.
It's our pleasure.
If the committees will now turn to our final budget hearing for today, the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. We have our budget analyst, Samuel Quist. Mr. Quist, will you go ahead and begin when you're ready?
Thank you. I will share my screen again. All right. Once again, my name is Samuel Quist. I will be presenting the analysis for the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. The budget for the agency decreases by 9.7 million or 6.1% to a total allowance of 150 million. These decreases are primarily due to less funding for the agency's major IT development project, as well as less funding for 2 of the tax credits the agency oversees. For the sake of time, I'm going to move to, if you're following along on the paper document, I'm going to move to the bottom of page 6. We have some performance measure data at the beginning of the document, but I'm going to move straight to the budget analysis section. beginning with the discussion on fiscal years 20 and 21. There are a few items here. First, there was a cost containment by the Board of Public Works for fiscal 20. There was a 1 million reduction in the tax credit programs by the Board of Public Works in fiscal 20. In 21, there was a $4.6 million increase in special funds for the computerized record information system, the agency's major IT development project that was added in to the project in 21. There was also a proposed deficiency appropriation for fiscal 21 of 1.2 million for the agency's charter unit. This funds National Information Consortium refund invoices. This entity collects business property and charter fees on behalf of the agency, and the deficiency is to fund refund invoices for that entity that weren't initially part of the budget for 21. There's a second cost containment action by the Board of Public Works for fiscal 21. This was a reduction of 2.3 million in general funds and 856,000 in special funds due to the elimination of 17 positions in the agency, the reduction of various operating expenses, and reductions to the enterprise zone tax credit program. I'll move to the Exhibit 4, the overview of agency spending. So the main portion of the budget for the agency covers the tax credit programs that it oversees, the homeowners, the renters, and the enterprise zone credits. These total 93.7 million in the allowance, or about 63% of the total agency budget. The other main category is the personnel expenses for the agency. That's about 30% or 45 million of the budget. The remainder of the operating expenses are for contracts and the major IT development project and some other miscellaneous operating expenses. Exhibit 5 breaks down the allowance by agency function. So again, the 63% for the tax credit programs. The next largest category is the real property assessments. That's 23% or 33.6 million. And then the remainder of the budget is the administration and IT functions, the charter unit for business filings, the business property assessment section, and the major IT development project. Exhibit 5 focuses in on the tax credit programs that the agency processes. So the homeowner's tax credit is the largest of the three at 64 million of the allowance. The next largest is the enterprise zone tax credit program at 25.3 million. And the smallest is the renter's tax credit at 4.4 million. Exhibit 7 shows the changes in the fiscal 22 allowance. Scroll down here. So starting with the personnel expenses. So the personnel expenses decreased by a total of about $774,000. There's a few different changes. There's some increase in the turnover rate, which causes a decrease, as well as a decrease to a few of the other benefit categories. There's a cost of living adjustment that causes a $373,000 increase. The other large changes in the budget, as I mentioned previously, the tax credit programs, the homeowners tax credit program funding decreases by 2.5 million, and the renter tax credit program decreases by 132,000. For the operating expenses, the computerized record information system major IT development project, that decreases by about 4.2 million. As I mentioned previously, there was an additional 4.6 million added in fiscal 21 for additional expenses in that fiscal year for the project. So in comparison, there are less expenses needed in fiscal 22. So there's a decrease there. The chart also takes into account that deficiency appropriation I mentioned previously. That's a $1.2 million decrease. And then we have a few other operating expenses that decrease in the chart there. There's also a BRFA provision in the budget for the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2021. This provision proposes to increase the local cost share that the local jurisdictions pay for the real property valuation, business property evaluation, and IT expenses. Currently, that's a 50-50 split in statute. The state pays 50%, the local jurisdictions pay 50%. The BRFA provision proposes to increase that to 60%, to a 60-40 split. And the next chart, exhibit number 8, this gives what the proposed costs in 22 for that 60-40 split would be. So the first column is what the counties currently pay. The second counties is what that would go up to under a 60% contribution, and then the amount of the increase there. So there's about, I don't know if this, I'm going to zoom out so that fits all on the screen for the totals. That's about $4 million total that would increase. And there's a contingent reduction of $4 million in general funds that the governor includes in the budget. So the general fund expenditures for the state would decrease by $4 million, and there would be an additional $4 million in special funds that would come in from the counties under that provision. The provision also includes an additional component where in subsequent fiscal years, the contributions from the counties would go up by 10%. So in fiscal 23, it would increase to a 70-30 contribution split. In 24, it would go up to an 80-20 split. And then in 25 and years after that, it would go up to a 90-10 split. And in each of those years, the general funds from the state would decrease as the the county jurisdiction, their contributions increase. Moving now to the personnel section of the analysis, we note a few items here. First, as I mentioned, there were 17 positions eliminated by the Board of Public Works for fiscal 21. This was part of about 25 total positions that were eliminated during fiscal 21. In 22, the regular personnel numbers stay at that same amount, 570.3 regular positions. The vacancy rate is 74 positions, which is about 13% of the total agency. And as noted here, that's about 23 positions higher than budgeted at turnover. We have in the write-up here, the agency was required by the 2020 Joint Chairman's Report to submit a report on the real property valuation division and the vacancies occurring in that division. There were 47 vacancies out of the total of 74 agency-wide at the end of the calendar year in that division. And it's been noted, and there's been reports from the Joint Chairman's Report required in previous years as well. In this division, there has been issues with turnover and salary rates that are not competitive with other surrounding jurisdictions. So the report that the agency submitted on this area noted that there were 31 employees that exited state service division, 16 employees that transferred to other state agencies during fiscal year 20. And during the fiscal year, there were 61 new hires and 63 employees promoted from within. And while the report noted that the agency conducted several hiring initiatives throughout the fiscal year that led to hiring of several positions during fiscal year 2020. Current vacancy data for the agency is showing that there's still a significant number of vacancies in that division. So the bold language that we have on page 15 of the analysis, we're including And I'll go through this when we get to the recommended action section, but DLS is recommending that the agency continue to submit another report based on fiscal 2021, updating the committees on hiring in this division and any impacts on that, especially due to the statewide hiring freeze and the pandemic, if there's any impacts from the current situation as well. I'm going to move now to the issues section. We have some more information about the tax credit programs and tax credit utilization. The first exhibit here, Exhibit 9, shows the program expenditures. This is the data out of the budget that goes towards the tax credit programs. So the largest, as I mentioned earlier, was the homeowners tax credit, which decreases by 2.5 million or 3.8%. And the renter's tax credit program decreases by 132,000 or 2.9%. The enterprise zone tax credit stays level funded at the same amount last year. And the agency notes that the amount budgeted for this is based off of the expenditures for the programs in the previous fiscal year. The next chart, Exhibit 10, shows data on the number of applicants that were eligible for the credit and the average value of the credit. Based on the data, this is showing there was a % decrease in the applicants for the homeowners credit program in fiscal 2020, about a 10% decrease for the renters tax credit program in fiscal 2020. For the applicants that were eligible in the homeowners credit program, this decreased by 4.9%. In the renters credit program, there was an increase of 15%. And for both tax credits, the average value of that credit did increase during the fiscal year. DLS is recommending or asking that the agency comment on the decrease in the number of applicants and then any factors that they have specifically driving that, especially due to the current economic situations. If there's any reasons why there are any people who are applicable for that are not applying, if there's any reasons that they have for that, and also if there's any outreach activities that the agency is planning to conduct for those credits for applications. Exhibit number 11 focuses specifically on the other credit program, the Enterprise Zone credit program. There were 526 participants in fiscal 20, which was a decrease. However, the current estimate during the current fiscal year is at 586 participants. As I mentioned, there was the budgeted amount for that is 25.3 million, which the agency reimburses to the counties to pay the credits for those businesses for their tax credits. And then the total capital investment by participants in the program has continued to increase to about $4 billion. So the agency runs the credit programs. However, it's the Department of Commerce that actually runs the criteria for establishing the zones and the participants in those zones. And the Department of Commerce noted that there's about 37 enterprise zones throughout the state and 3 focus areas in 18 counties in Baltimore City. The data shows that about 300 of the total 586 participants are located in Baltimore City, and Baltimore City receives approximately 19 million of the total 25.3 million funded for the project. The other item we have in here is on property tax lien sales. The 2020 JCR report had the agency submit a report on this subject. The agency noted that in Maryland, when there are delinquent taxes on a property, there's a lien placed on it, and jurisdictions are required by statute to place this into a tax sale. The Office of the State Tax Sale Ombudsman, which is located in the agency, was established by Chapter 730 of 2019 in order to assist property owners with navigating this process. There is a redemption period built into statute which allows homeowners to pay some of their delinquent taxes in order to have the lien removed from their property. The report that SDAT submitted, they included a couple of interesting points of data. The first was in Exhibit 12 was the delinquency tax thresholds for the counties that have that. And as the agency notes, the counties that have a threshold, they're relatively low dollar amounts in unpaid and delinquent property taxes, as you can see from the chart here, that would allow a lien to be placed on a property. The agency also notes in number 13, the counties that held tax lien sales during calendar year 2020. The report notes that about half of the counties canceled or postponed indefinitely their tax sales due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the current economic situation. However, as this chart shows, there were about 11 counties in Baltimore City that continued to go along with their sales during the calendar year. There were about 2,555 total tax lien sales that went on during the calendar year. And DLS is noting on here, we're including in the recommended action section for the agency to continue to submit or ask for a report similar to what they submitted for calendar 2020, for calendar 21, for the information on what tax sales are occurring during calendar 2021, especially since we are still seeing economic impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic. And also since there have been other actions by the state of Maryland, especially a moratorium on foreclosures for unpaid mortgage payments and other economic related suspensions, we think it's important to remain briefed by the agency on counties that are continuing along with their tax lien sales as long as the pandemic is continuing on. So moving to the recommended action section, DLS is recommending that the committees ask for two narrative reports. The first one, as I just went through, was on the tax lien sales and requiring data along with that. Also in this report, we're including the agency to include information from the tax sale ombudsman on any outreach activities that they are doing during the year to assist with navigating the tax lien sale process. And then the second narrative report is on the real property valuation assessor vacancies, which I spoke about previously. This is similar to the report that was required last year for fiscal 21, or for fiscal 20 rather. This report would include the similar information for fiscal 21 on hiring activities within that division, along with any impacts that the current statewide hiring freeze and current situation has impacted on that, and any data on the evaluation that they've done comparing salaries of assessors to neighboring jurisdictions, and then any other data that has been cited by employees for the continued turnover, so that we can continue to gain insight on why there continues to be turnover in this particular division. The update section, we also included a brief update on a real property valuation equity and transparency study that's underway. This was part of the third JCR report that was required by the 2020 JCR report. The agency submitted a report that included data on property tax assessment appeals, and the number of successful appeals and properties that were reassessed during the year. The Joint Chairman's report asked the agency also to compare that data to income data on the properties that were reassessed and to study if there was any correlation to the income levels of those properties and whether those properties gained a favorable reassessment during the process. The report that the agency submitted did not include that study, and the agency reported that it was unable to get that income data to conduct that study. So there were a research group identified by the University of Maryland from some members of the legislature that were facilitated to conduct that study. And it is currently in its preliminary stages. However, the plan is that that study will update the committees on any relevant findings once it has reached its conclusion. Lastly, in the analysis document, I'm not going to go through each of these individually, but I would note for your reference, there are several appendices. Appendix 1 gives a summary of those 3 JCR reports from 2020 that I mentioned. Appendix number 2 shows the audit findings from the Office of Legislative Audit Hearings. Since there were a separate hearing on these audit findings, I'm not going to go through these again during this hearing, but we do note the audit findings that the legislative auditor went through previously during that separate hearing. And then the third appendix shows some more summary information on the computerized record system, major IT project that the agency is undergoing right now. But with that, I will conclude the presentation and I will take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that comprehensive analysis, Mr. Quist. We will now open it up for questions from members of our subcommittees. I don't see it. I see our Vice Chair Proctor. Go right ahead. You, Vice Chair, go ahead and unmute your.
Like that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is more of a comment, a statement. Last year, we talked about a concern that there were clients, many of whom were attorneys, who would bring in a case of maybe some big commercial properties with millions of dollars, and they would continue to ask for a reschedule, ask for delays. And so when and if the board decided to award them the monies, they would also get the increase by all the interest that occurred during that time. And so last year I asked that that the assessment board do a report and show us, give us some indication if this is happening, where it's happening, and how much money is going for interest that's really not due. And I have not received that.
To clarify, is that related to the enterprise, the tax credit payments, the payments you're referring to, or is that the business assessments?
That's more a commercial business assessments. That's where it happens. Because you come in and you have a property and it's worth millions of dollars, and you got it. Well, that's what I asked for, and I did not receive that.
Okay.
Vice Chair, the agency is also going to come up, and maybe you can, because they would have been, I think, maybe the author of it. Is that who you asked it from more so?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess
and okay, we have it on the radar, so when they're about to come up now, and if you can just hold that question and ask them directly, and we can get a more direct response to alleviate or to address your issue. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions for our analysts? Seeing none, hearing none, we will now move to our agency representative, and Mr. Michael Higgs, Director of State Department of Assessments and Taxation, Ms. Christina Trotta, Chief Financial Officer of the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. And I think those are the only two that I have on my list today. So, Mr. Quist, thank you so much for your analysis as well. And we will now turn it over to Mr. Michael Higgs.
Chairs Haynes and Griffith and honorable delegates and senators, I'm Michael Higgs, for the record, Director of the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, and our CFO, Christina Trotta, is with me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify in response to the operating budget analysis. And thank you very much, Mr. Quist, for that in-depth analysis as well. Due to the dedication and hard work of our department staff, a continued focus on improved customer service by management, and inspired leadership by the governor's team, 2020 was an excellent year for the Maryland Department of Assessments and Taxation, even under the complications of the pandemic. SDAT's real property and taxpayer services teams realized significant accomplishments and increased efficiencies in 2020. These included going from zero telework to almost full telework, helping to reinstate countless businesses for PPP loans and financing during the height of the pandemic, a new customer service contact center that we opened that fielded over 100,000 calls last year, a newly created tax sale ombudsman's office that helped a great many Maryland homeowners in need during these tough times, and our real property team that produced the highest quality data once again and is now set to hold virtual appeal hearings in the coming year. In our written testimony, you'll find answers to the operating budget analysis. But first, let me address the question that was raised a moment ago about commercial appeals. The commercial appeals getting delayed by the professional representatives, the tax reps, we call them in our business, is certainly a problem. And they have a strategy of delay until as long as they can. And then it ends up being a matter open for resolution after the county budget has already closed. And then the county has to weigh the costs and benefits of a possible payment with interest years down the road versus a settlement that may not be in their best interest in the short term to make sure they don't have that economic uncertainty down the road. I completely concur with your comments, Ms. Vice Chair, and it is a real problem, but it is also one that is steeped in due process and one that it's very difficult to deal with and not catch the small businesses out there, not catch the residential folks out there that want to make sure that we have an open and non-adversarial process for appeals in the first three levels of our appeal. We have the first level of appeal is at the agency level, where somebody will come in and talk to the assessor and an assessor supervisor. And typically about a third of those appeals see a reduction at that level. Then we have the PTAB, Property Tax Assessment Appeal Board, and then we have the tax court. And all of those can be handled without attorneys involved and without any court costs. Then beyond that, if you want to take it further, you can get attorneys and go to actual courts of law to appeal or enforce decisions. I am happy to set up a meeting with our state supervisor and our commercial supervisor, with yourself and any other interested parties, and we can have a dialogue about the issues and possible things that can be done. But it is something that we are well aware of the situation that this causes, and we do everything we can to try to avoid those situations where a county might be faced with a large and uncertain liability down the road. With that, I really don't have anything else to say.
Okay.
If you guys have any questions for us, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Are there questions from the members of the subcommittees? And I will specifically ask Vice Chair Proctor, did she want to follow up in any regard with her issue first?
I certainly do want to follow up. However, I'd like to have, prior to our meeting, I'd like to know how much monies the counties are paying out with this problem that we've discussed. I'd like to have that before we go in the meeting.
That's something you need to get from the county finance offices. I don't pay out property taxes. I issue property assessments.
Well,
The property
you don't
taxes
have
are
any,
handled by county finance offices.
you don't have any record as to what the settlement was?
We do have records of some of a lot of those because they get inputted back into our system, but the I don't know how to get you the data set you're looking for that wouldn't encompass every commercial settlement that we have, or every commercial matter that goes into our system.
Well,
but we can certainly get together and talk. We get our staffs together. I mean, at the staff level are where my guys know which column the data goes into and what we can pull report wise. So I can't tell you today. I just have a feeling that would be difficult to get that data, but we can certainly circle back and put a finer point on that after the meeting.
Yeah, I think it would be very helpful for each county to know how much they are paying in interest in cases like this. That would be a big start if we could get that.
And I've worked very closely with the Anne Arundel County Finance Office, the Howard County Finance Office, Montgomery County Finance Office, Baltimore City on these exact issues over the last several years. So it is something that we work together cooperatively on. It's a very good working relationship we have with all the finance offices that we work in partnership with. And I think they should work with us as part of the solution on this if we are going to try to tackle that problem.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Senator Eckert, your hand's raised.
It is.
Sarah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much for the information and for the presentation by everybody. It was very thorough and raised a lot of interesting questions. But for the department, with regard to the cost of the new data system, Mr. Higgs, are all the counties aware of the implications of that? I mean, the cost to them, are they?
Yeah, that's not part of the county cost share. The new computer system that was referenced in the report is for our taxpayer services side of the house, and they are excluded from the county cost share. Our real property and administration and OIT budgets are separate from that computer system.
So the cost share is something that our counties are well aware of?
Yes, it's something that they've been, we've had this cost share since I believe the early aughts, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, when
and
that
at various
decision.
times the level of contribution has fluctuated with different budgetary situations the state has been in over the years. So it's not always been 50-50 like it was last year.
Right, but as that changes, are they kept apprised of that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, because COVID's been a hard year for all of our communities, so I'm particularly sensitive to increasing costs to them, you know. And I know property is a little bit hot on the Eastern Shore, but I don't think it's that much so in Dorchester County yet. So
residential property is on fire right now.
Yeah, I know. And yeah, I know it's scary when you live with unbuilt lots in front of you. But I am concerned about how we move forward and the continuing cost of doing business for our local governments until we get a good balance between lower income and higher income folks. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
Do we have any further questions from members of the subcommittee? Chair Griffith.
Yeah, mine's just very quick. I want to follow up on Senator Eckert, because it seems to me that last session we spent a lot of time talking about that local share piece. This was a proposal that was in the BRFA last year, correct? And then we decided not to take action and make that change at this time. Am I understanding that correctly or remembering that correctly, Mr. Higgs?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, was it the same proposal last year, the 60-40?
Yes, ma'am. I believe it was.
And it was the General Assembly that decided not to take that action, correct?
I believe there has been for the last several years a proposal to change the cost share, and each year it has ended up being 50-50.
Yeah,
I've been here over the last 5 years.
I'm still learning. This was my first year on this subcommittee after spending, 16 years on the House on the Education Subcommittee, and then I came over to the Senate, was on education. So I'm still kind of learning some of the history, but it was sounding familiar, Senator Eckert, and I do recall us having some conversations about that. And so I'll follow up with you or Mr. Quist about that. Thanks.
Sure, Madam Chair. And I do have one question, and I just want to sort of get the point of reference correct. Otherwise, the question is going to be inaccurate. I think on the homestead tax credits, I saw, read, or heard that there's been a loss of about $4.4 million. Does that sound about right?
The
I'm going to ask how.
And that was specifically in Montgomery County with the lion's share of it, and a very small amount in Baltimore City, where because of the way our system was calculating the tax credits, we were reducing the credit amount by certain other tax credits those individuals were receiving, and it was a disparate treatment versus residents in other parts of the state. So there is legislation moving through the House and Senate currently to have SDAT make retroactive payments for the last 3 years for any tax credit recipients that were affected by that.
Okay. And okay, so that's retro, that by legislation, should the legislation pass it, it's retroactive 3 years or up to 3 years?
I believe it's up to 3.
Okay, all right. And I don't see any further questions, but one thing I do want to just mention is the Vice Chair of Public Safety Administration. I know has a deep concern of getting that information from a request that she had earlier. So if all possible, if your agency can be as responsive and working with the Vice Chair offline to expeditiously try to figure out how the information that has been requested can come forth, would be great. And we'll also ask that we share it with the members of the respective committees as well. And with that, I don't see any further questions unless my screen is not showing anything correctly, but I see there's no further questions. And Madam Chair.
Mr. Chair, thanks for your hospitality for our committee, and we just wish everybody a safe and healthy weekend.
Okay, everybody have a safe and healthy week.
Yeah, thank you. Well done, Mr.
Thank you. I feel like it's a reunion already.
I know, it's kind of fun, isn't it? Yeah, we never get to see you all other than this way. This is cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, great. Everybody have a great weekend.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.